Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Science of Mind Health. I'm your host, Daniel, and today I'm so lucky to be joined by Miss Nori, who is a very big figure in kind of the neurodiverse scene. You're a great mom to a neurodiverse child, and I just have a couple of questions to ask you today.
Hi, Daniel. Glad to be here. Trying to do best as a mom can, but you're very kind. Let's go.
All right. So my first question is, can you share a bit about your journey as a mother to a neurodiverse child, and what were some early signs, and how did you sort of adapt as a family?
Okay. So I have three boys actually, and two of my kids are neurodivergent. The oldest one was a later thing, but I'll speak a little bit more about my autistic son. He is now 16, but he was diagnosed at 3. At about 2.5, we began to notice that he was definitely a little different. He started to sort of be somewhat withdrawn. He was speaking, and he had a lot of words, and somehow he had figured out how to read. I certainly wasn't one of those mothers that was very active about teaching reading very early or with flashcards or anything, but he had appeared to pick up being able how to read, but he would just say the words, spell things out, not necessarily appear to be communicating meaningfully, or rather, I should say, we didn't necessarily understand him. So he seemed quite different. And around the time I was sort of wondering things came together where he was at this sort of little preschool, and the teachers had asked me for a meeting, and they said, so, I mean, they were very kind about it. They said that, we don't diagnose, we're not able to, and we're not necessarily a big believer in labels, but we do have to tell you that your son is certainly not typical. He's a different kind of guy, and he is exhibiting um, like signs of anxiety, but not in not quite in situations where you would see that happen with other children. He very much wants to keep to himself. And then there was that whole thing about lack of eye contact, which we tend to hear about with regards to people who are autistic. And so they said you might want to sort of get this further investigated. That kind of where our journey began. I suppose I was wondering myself, about these differences, because we already had, another, neurodivergent individual kind of in the family. So I suppose maybe my family understood, a little bit more. It's my niece, this amazing, wonderful individual, also who happens to have Down syndrome. So I think maybe a bit more aware about developmental milestones. But we then, got an appointment with a developmental pediatrician. Also decided to start speech therapy immediately because I think, irrespective of the diagnosis, it was quite obvious that at 2.5, he wasn't speaking like other kids, right? So we figured that, we needed that help right away in any case. And the speech therapist who saw him before the developmental pediatrician said that I also cannot officially diagnose, but he says that it would be irresponsible of me not to tell you that I am very, very sure that he has a developmental condition and it's likely to be autism. So he said, make sure you don't miss that appointment. And that's essentially how our journey began. We got the appointment when Timo was just above 3. I think it was 3 in a month or two.
Right. And on that note, do you have like any sort of like quick advice to parents who like suspect their kid may be neurodivergent, and like what tips do you have sort of?
Yeah, I think I do. Our journey has been quite long, but my apologies. Let me go back to the second part of your first question,
Oh,
which
all right.
is what did our family do? Well,
Oh,
maybe
sorry.
you can get a sense that we've got into action mode. We were
Mhm.
already like, oh, okay, we've got, there are things that we need to do. We've got to help him out. I think we had a sense of like, early intervention is something that would make a difference. So that's kind of what we did. We were fortunate enough, I think, not to have to deal with sort of the issues of denial and things like that, which was great. But considering we are talking about mental health, one of the things I want to mention that maybe is was not such a great thing is that we didn't kind of pause to deal with our own state of emotional health and situation because it was very unexpected news, right? It's a really big thing. And I think you know you while you're sort of very motivated, parents make kids our priority, and that will always be the case. I'm not saying to change your priorities, but you've also got to make sure you're kind of in a good place to be there for whoever you care for, right? So I guess my advice now to everyone, okay, one of it would be to yeah, let that news kind of sink in. It's going to be rather big, very, very unexpected, and you are entitled to all the feels that you feel. Um, it's important that you hear and accept the news, and even if you don't get to maybe process it in the beginning, and you sort of end up being a little bit like us and feel that you need to take action, do know that at some point in time, you're going to have to go through the motions of all the feelings and everything that that means because the science already shows us that yes, our mind, our brain, there are parts of being human that will allow you to kind of set things aside, maybe be in a little bit of denial, not want to face the kind of thing. But the rest of your body, your physical self as a human being, that part doesn't know how to lie. Like if you take something sharp, slice it against yourself, you bleed. The skin doesn't know how to pretend it's not hurt. So this is a good thing. This is a good thing because your body does take the impact of stuff that's going on, including your feelings. So it might be less tangible, but it's true. The science is already there. And, as the title of, a particular book goes, you might have heard of it. The body keeps the score. So if you're not going to deal with your emotions at some point in time, your state of mental and emotional health will start to affect your physical health. It's going to hit you. It's going to happen at some point. So parents, feel the feels. Do expect that having to process it. And the only way to do is go through. You cannot go over. You can't pretend it didn't happen. You cannot set it aside. You have to go through it at some point. And then, you know, um, once that's all there, then, pick yourself up and then do something for your child. Because the only guarantee of nothing happening and perhaps no progress or things getting worse is for you to do nothing, right? You might embark on some form of therapy. There's so many choices these days, and not everything is going to be correct, and it's not everything is going to be right. And sometimes you're going to mess up, and sometimes, things are kind of going to go wrong, but that's okay because we learn and we move on. So, don't also sit with it for too long. You have to process it, but at the same time, then you kind of move on. And my other big pieces of advice, which I also got very early on, and it's not changed. I have, however, maybe changed and learned many other things along the way. But what's not changed is the need for some parent education. So find out more, get yourself trained up. There are lots of options to do this, including for free. Here in Malaysia, certainly there are a lot of resources for like workshops and things like that. But it is worth even, investing in things which you have to pay for, And the last bit of advice is don't allow yourself to feel alone. Um, Reach out, build community if you have to, but usually these days you can find community. So those would be my three things.
Right. On that note of building community, what inspired you to bring We Rock the Spectrum to Malaysia, and what impact have you seen on children specifically?
Okay, so the gym has been life changing. We found it when we were actually on a family trip to Los Angeles. My husband had some work, but it was also an opportunity to maybe, as soon as he finished that, take a little bit of a break. So family came along. And when all the kids go, we do have to make a bit of an effort to try and find things that everyone can do. And then when you have a kid who's different and sometimes gets overwhelmed by situations, as a number of autistic people tend to do. You can't like say, okay, everybody can just go to this one, maybe like big, gaming center or something. It might not work for our guy who doesn't really like crowds. So we had to be on the lookout for something. And we figured, hey, we're in the United States. I'm sure there's something we can find. And we found this gym, this inclusive indoor play space for kids to sort of play, learn, grow together. Everybody was welcome. The team was trained, and they had all this amazing equipment. A lot of it, the sensory friendly but also supportive equipment, is used by therapists, in fact. So what people can do is, and again, where the parent education training comes in. So you can come in and do the therapeutic activities with your kids, for your kids, because the equipment is already there. So if you cannot get access to therapy, like to actually see like an occupational therapist or sensory integration therapist or anybody like that that you probably would need, you can kind of do, for yourself. You can do it for yourself, and for your kids, at least you will get some measure of something that your child needs. And so we had such a good time, and we thought this was amazing. We're like, there needs to be something like this at home in Malaysia, back in Malaysia. And we reached out to them, and yep, we managed to bring We Rock the Spectrum Kids Gym over to Malaysia, and that was in 2016. And we've been able to, I think, well, I hope to, well, continue this aspect of it. I'm not sure that we've been, fully successful to build a big community, but we have built a community, particularly of parents who have kids who are autistic from lower income families. And that's because one of the big programs that we launched is called Therapy Through Play. And it is precisely a program that was designed to help support the parents, in particular, or any of the caregivers in the family, to support them to build the skills and the confidence to do those like therapeutic activities for their kids, right? Because it's just too expensive to get one-to-one therapy. It's a lot. It costs a lot, I think, anywhere in the world, and certainly it's true for Malaysia as well. So we've done several cycles of that program, and we were fortunate enough to be able to work with like, um, institutional donors. For example, this amazing organization called Yayasan Hasanah stepped up and gave us a grant, and that allowed us to work with a whole bunch of kids. And so what we did is, with a group of 50, we did different batches. With a group of 50, we actually sent out a survey at the end to ask parents for feedback, like, have you noticed any positive, discernible change in your child? Would you like to continue this program? And so on and so forth. And we got like, I mean, I did expect it to be better than half. I was quite confident, otherwise we wouldn't have kicked off the program. A lot of elements of it was stuff that I'd used for my own son. So we, of course, were privileged enough to send our kid to a therapist, but we also added on like stuff at our gym, because it's not enough for you to see your therapist like, once in a while or something like that. But you need to have those kind of movement-based programs, especially for children. It helps so much. So I was doing that, or another member of the family, and then we're very fortunate he has a great caregiver, so we have that at home too. And we were all doing this with him at the gym, so I was pretty confident we were going to get more than 50%. We ended up with a more than 90% feedback on people saying that they could see that this had benefited their kid in some way, and they would explain. So some of them said, their kids got adjusted to a whole new environment and look forward to swinging. They had a kid who was very, very quiet, and they thought the kid was completely non-speaking or non-verbal, but had started to make noises. And they had their kids like build a sense of connection with the parents, because we were making the parents do stuff with the kids, right? So I was blown away. I think when we read the data, I probably burst into tears that it had it had impacted them really well. And thanks to the good folks at Yayasan Hasana and a whole bunch of like even individual donors and things like that, we were able to work with, more batches of kids going through the TTP. So I'm hoping to be able to continue that, and maybe add on add on some other programs. It's been very, very clear um, that, this kind of stuff really, really helps the kids out. It really does. I mean, I think we all know that, we're sentient beings, we're human beings. We all need to move, particularly important for children. And it doesn't change if your child has a developmental condition, if your child is neurodivergent, you still need to do it. I mean, there's a person first before any kind of label and diagnosis. And, that kid needs to move also. And there are, multiple benefits of that, obviously. And in this case, I think it was just being able to have a program that was personally structured to the kid. So the kid would start off by meeting a therapist, and that's how the sensory profile was then established. Then the program gets written, then the parents get taught how to do it with the kids, so it's not having to depend on a therapist to have to do the therapy as such with the child. That's kind of how it works.
Wow. I think anyone would have broken into tears. I mean, that's pretty significant changes.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? And anything
Yeah.
that's like, clinically sort of like, significant in terms of data would have been 30% and up, right? This was like more than 90%. We couldn't believe it either, but like we went through all the forms and we looked at it and we asked for samples, we asked for examples, and we also had the parents say we want to continue. We want to continue with the program. And even if that meant that they just had a place that they found to be happy for themselves and the family, I mean, that's a plus. That's a plus, right? So that, whatever it was that they felt that had, benefited them in that sense. And then we were able to do it, during the time when I mean, the world was going through COVID. So even in lockdown, because there was this therapy element of the program, the kids were allowed to come. So I think that, of course, would have had a positive, I think impact on the parents being able to, come out, just, even get a bit of respite. But I am pretty confident, and a lot of the research is there to show the benefits of occupational therapy being, incorporated to or as part of intervention for a lot of people with, developmental issues, because it often comes with sensory related stuff, right? And if that's the case, your body does need to move in order to help support those other things, including speech. I mean, development of language comes from, your body and, your physical self being able to do certain things in certain ways. It helps supports so many things. And, of course, the stuff that is very well established, like, the social things. Yeah, and fitness, health, of course, right? All those things.
All right. You've spoken about how your son Timur needs to sweat it out to feel balanced. What role has physical activity played in his self-regulation and development as a person?
Okay. So, Timo has identified proprioceptive and vestibular issues. These two are clear. I think there are a couple of things going on, and right now we're going through puberty, and that's quite difficult, to be honest. We're going through a very difficult phase. But proprioceptive issues are things related to your sort of joint sense and knowing where you are, in space at any given time. And the vestibular stuff is kind of related to balance. Now, both these things require some kind of like movement input in order to help support the development of a system related to these things, which is not, quite what it should be for a person or a kid, right? So uh, he needs to do particular types of activities that help with his set of issues. So, for example, um, things that involve kind of a lot of jumping. So the trampoline is a good one. Climbing was really good because you really have to be aware of where your body is in given space. And then the vestibular stuff, I mean, swings are really, really great for that. And I think generally for him, and this is what we learned from observing him and also what the therapists were, kind of sharing with us, that whole, I guess, sweat it out to sort of feel a bit better is just one way of describing that, he's got to sort of move and move for at least a minimum amount of time, right? I mean, it's not quite enough for you to just sort of, okay, I'm just gonna get up and just walk around for maybe 3 minutes. So unless you're doing that repeatedly throughout the day and here and there, it's not gonna be enough that that's your only physical movement, right? So I guess being able to use the word like sweat, say sweating it out, would mean to say that he got, some cardiovascular stuff going on, and there was a certain length of time as well. And I think it's, I mean, yeah, you've probably, I mean, in your own sort of, research and looking into things, it's very well established that physical activity helps your mental health, right? So it is true of neurodivergent individuals as well. Yes, their brains work differently, but I think it is no different that their brains do benefit from physical movement. I am absolutely sure of that.
Right. Are there any national or community level initiatives that you're currently advocating for that can support learning and emotional balance in neurodiverse children?
I think in general, I'm part of a group of other moms, and we actually have a podcast also,
Oh,
right? So it's five mothers and five of us all have neurodivergent children, and each of us does work, does kind of we were involved in the community at different levels. I believe Dr. Choi, right? Dr. S.K. Choi. So she owns a multidisciplinary intervention center. And yes, it's a private center that works with a lot of different people, and they have a whole lot of different therapists. But the two things that I really love that they do is, continuous education, and then also they do support programs for folks that are, maybe who sort of cannot afford it, subsidize things and stuff like that. So that's like, for example, Dr. Choi. We have another one of our moms who is part of the law reform group looking at public policy and the laws with regards to persons with disabilities. So looking at the Persons with Disabilities Act in Malaysia. So for me, I work through the gym, and also I'm happy to go out and support sort of other initiatives by doing speaking engagements and things like that. But together, collectively, the five of us, we, through our podcast, which comes out once a week, Kita Family wants to advocate in general for a more inclusive Malaysia, right? For a community, for in different areas. We look at the workplace, we look at support for uh, opportunities, host the formal years of schooling, for example, and we look at like a whole breadth of issues that are connected to people who are neurodivergent. And this kind of came about because we were working together and very hopeful initially of an announcement that there was supposed to be like a National Council for Autism. Unfortunately, there was a change in government, and I think not just in Malaysia, but as these things go, sometimes when the policies change and things like that, then the initiatives taken up by different people have changed. So that's kind of gone a little bit silent, and that's how we decided, okay, that obviously was a very big thing that could potentially have helped so many people, but doesn't mean that's going to stop us from doing whatever maybe small thing that we can. At the national level. It's hard to say because everything is like in different stages, right? So arguably, if you're looking at law reform, like Anit is, if that works out, or if we are able to give input into public policy, then that will kind of help at the national level. But of course, if nothing happens, it's something that we kind of have to wait on and see. And also, I think just getting the message out. I think awareness is still something we need to push for. Things are better, it's better in Malaysia. The awareness is better, but it's not quite there. We still meet people who don't have a good understanding of the different issues, and we want to have the awareness, and so people can understand, so they can have acceptance, appreciation, and of course, eventually, we want that to turn into action. These are the 4 A's from Dr. Stephen Chor. Um, And the action is finally what's going to be needed. So I guess there are different things. Mostly we work in, the different pockets of our community. But yes, we absolutely have this ambition to affect something on like a as big of a level that is possible. So I suppose currently the main thing in terms of my work as a parent advocate, apart from the gym, would be the podcast.
Right. Do you feel society's understanding of neurodiversity has changed in Malaysia, and what still needs to evolve?
It's changed a little bit. Like, so my journey with Timo, what, he's 16 now. So it's about 13 years officially that we've been doing this. I think people are aware in the sense that they're like, oh, okay, I've heard about autism or ADHD, right? So it's not an entirely strange word that they don't know anything about. But has that translated into things which make a genuine difference to our community? I think there are many, many areas that are still lacking, I would say, right? Like inclusive education. In the public space, we have what is known as like, so the translation to English would be integrated schools. Now, an integrated school is not a fully inclusive school because they have special education classes for kids with disabilities. So they're there in the public school system, but it's kind of like in there but separate. So they're in their own classes. They don't really mix or are together with the typical children, for example. And then the other thing, which is a little bit challenging, is that irrespective of your disability, you're going to be grouped all together. And, with different types of learners, with their minds and brains all working differently, they actually have, different needs, in fact. So it's not ideal. It's not bad, as in it's in a step in the direction, but do we have fully inclusive schools in the, public education system in Malaysia? We don't. And if I were to look at, for example, even for private education, which is something that is pretty popular in Malaysia and has become, somewhat more affordable than before, we can't really say that there are a lot of full inclusive schools in that sector as well, right? So this is just with respect to education. Now, if we talk about other areas, so for example, public transportation or public spaces and things like that, there are accommodations for people with physical disabilities. So, for the most example being like access for wheelchair. But as you know, Daniel, it's like when it's neurodivergence and it's your brain being different, it's sort of like it's been described as a hidden disability, right? It's not something that's obvious, like you can see, like, oh, I understand that you cannot hear me, or I can see you need a wheelchair, right? It's like I have to, how do I understand what's going on? It's because it manifests itself in terms of behaviors, usually, right? Or if it's something that maybe needs to be communicated, and it's not really quite easy to understand. So we have, for example, a few shopping centers, a few malls that have called themselves autism friendly or sensory friendly. They have things like a calming room. They have trained their staff to be able to kind of identify and be more helpful. They've briefed sort of like their tenants, like the mall and different brands and shops and all that exist there are very, like, would say, have a level of awareness that is a bit more than average. But why can't we have all malls like that, right? Why is it like maybe three malls out of God knows how many tens and tens and tens of malls, and these are across the big city centers that exist. So we have a ways to go, but there's absolutely progress for sure in our, in my own family's more than 10 plus journey. We have seen how things have changed, and we have seen, I think generally people been more accepting, and one of the really good things also that's happened is less of a stigma. That's really important because the first thing that needs to change is the mindset. And if mindset of people will change, then we can hope for the next step, which is action.
Right. What advice would you give to parents who are just beginning this journey? Like, and also especially in places where stigma still exists.
Okay, that's a tough one. I think I'd go back to the stuff I mentioned earlier. That sort of applies when it's sort of like at the beginning of your journey, I think, right? Like you kind of, educate yourself, make sure you're not alone, get support. Reach out to other like-minded families. I mean, family support and support from your friends, I mean, all your loved ones and all that is a big deal. But you really kind of want to connect with people who will more immediately understand what you're going through, right? It's like it makes a difference to be able to connect with another parent, for example. Makes a difference to hear from an actual voice, of a person who is autistic or having some other kinds of neurodivergence. I mean, nothing beats hearing from an individual themselves, like what their lives can be like and what they experience. Yes, it's true, everybody's different, but still that voice matters. Yeah, I would, that would be kind of my tips. Did you have a second part to that question? Sorry, remind me. It was what tips would I have for the new parents, and what's the other thing?
Like especially in places where stigma still exists.
Oh, where stigma still exists. Okay, so this is where the connection to fellow. I think you've asked me quite pretty comprehensive. I hope it helps.
Yeah, it has helped a lot. And just thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
All the best to you, Daniel. I
All
hope we
right.
get to connect properly another time. Good
Yes.
luck.
All the best to you as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.